On this edition of Independent Sources, Africa Redux. Does a second term for President Obama mean a second chance to review his policy toward Africa?
Innovates alone. An MIT grad hopes to spark young minds in the West African country of Sierra Leone.
And in defense of immigrant art, a local organization emerges to promote the work of foreign artists. Welcome to Independent Sources. I'm Diana Ravinka.
And I'm Gary Pierre-Pierre. When Barack Obama first became president of the United States, many in Africa hailed his election as a new era for policy towards the continent. The president became a messiah of sorts to many Africans. Several of them felt that a man who could draw his heritage directly from East Africa would surely do more for the countries of Africa.
However, that's not been the case. The president has implemented what some have called a studied detachment from the continent. Some analysts contend that Mr. Obama's caution comes from the need to avoid further criticism from the far right, who have already questioned his citizenship and his faith.
So with that in mind, will the president's approach to Africa be any different this second term? I spoke with political scientist Nyaka Lagoke and journalist Rosalind McClymont about how things may change the second time around. Nyaka, how would you describe Obama's policy towards Africa?
For us, for people like me who believe in a better Africa, we were a little bit disappointed by Obama's foreign policy vis-à-vis Africa. Because under his leadership, we saw the bombing of Libya by the NATO forces, and we saw the intervention of the UN in Libya and Ivory Coast, and the French troops, to dislodge former President Laurent Gbagbo. And we thought that for somebody like Obama, who is a very powerful symbol, that he could have been above the fray, because his intervention convinced people that America is still pursuing an imperialistic agenda, even if with Africa, even though, as we know, his father came from Kenya. I was not surprised because when he went to Ghana, it was a very, very interesting visit, but his speech he delivered there was already a warning sign, because how can Obama go to Ghana, talk about the birth of the new nation, which was the title of a sermon delivered by Dr. King, and then he did not even pay tribute to Kwame Nkrumah, who was the first president of Ghana, and then under his leadership, Ghana became independent, and the independence of Ghana was very significant for the continent of Africa.
Rosalind, I'm glad Naka brought up Ghana because it's a country you know very well. You've been there several times. First of all, do you agree with Naka's assessment about Obama's foreign policy and the symbolism of his trip to Ghana, which was his first trip to Africa?
Yes, I look at what President Obama has done, particularly in Ghana, as something that is very positive. And I'm going to quote a Harvard professor, Juma, who said that President Obama's seeming disengagement and distance from Africa has taught Africa a couple of things. One, that it has to look at Obama as the head of a sovereign state and not as a relative of whom much is expected. That's one. Secondly, I look at the other side. You're talking about military policies. And remember, the militarization of the United States policy towards Africa, which Obama is carrying on, began with President Clinton, with AFRICOM. George Bush stepped that up tremendously.
Well, all of that was to fight terrorism.
Precisely, but it is still there. But look at what he is doing for the economic development, President Obama. Look at the steps that he has taken, the policies that he has put in place as recently as this year, as June, when 2 pillars of a 4-pillar policy deal with opportunity and development and trade and investment and the general economic advancement of Africa. That is where I see you have a much more important engagement from President Obama.
Well, that's a very good point. But Nyaka, what about that? Oftentimes when we talk about Africa, it's a huge place, but it's often about aid and development. Are the current leaders now in various countries across the continent ready to be partners in a sort of like a business way, as opposed to bringing aid and so-called development to parts of the continent?
Okay, even though we want to see Africa as one, there are many pockets of hope and then development in Africa. You know, the people portray Africa as a land of despair, a land of helplessness and hopelessness. But there are some countries where people are doing well. And then,
for those of us who don't know, give us some examples of the shining.
Mauritius is the best example. Mauritius is doing well, and there are investors and some African leaders in different parts of Africa who are trying to do what we need today. We don't see Obama. He's not. Of course, Obama is a relative of Africa. We did not expect Obama, who is the president of the United States of America, to come and develop like Africa overnight. We did not expect that from him. But my point is that, and we did not expect Obama to put an end to the militarization, politics America has undertaken since the beginning of its creation. We did not expect him to do that. But what we need to know is that, I don't know if the sister in the studio has some data, but I don't see what Obama, beside the AGOA and the discourse on on energy policy, I don't see what Africa has gained on the term of economics since Obama has become president of the United States of America.
That's a good point. You were starting to talk about that. Can you elaborate on what Obama has done?
In 4 years, to quote Tom Friedman when he was talking to Netanyahu, my president was very busy. And also, with domestic situation here. But look at the energy initiative he has taken that is now residing in Johannesburg, to promote the financing and the development of clean energy technology and clean energy projects in Africa. Health. If you want to look at what everyone says, George Bush did so much for Africa, Obama is one of the co-sponsors of an initiative that George Bush has put in place last year to improve cervical cancer in Zambia, to help to promote that. When it comes to trade and investment, he signed an agreement. There's a framework trade and investment agreement between the United States and Angola, just signed by President Obama. I think it was in 2009. So these steps are being taken, and for the very first time he has engaged. When you look at Africa's population, much of which is very young, under 30 years old, he has engaged the young leaders, both from the private sector, the nonprofit sector, career people, along the lines of entrepreneurship. The Young Leaders Conference that was held in Washington for the very first time under Obama, where he is engaging the next generation of leaders.
Let's move this.
I'd like to jump in. Okay, you have another question?
Yes, I do. I want to move this forward a little bit. What would you like to see from Obama the next 4 years that he'll have a chance to do? What does he need to do for you to say, hey, it was worth it to have him as a president as far as Africa is concerned?
Okay, thank you very much. This is what I was going to mention one thing. Obama, first of all, maybe I should have said that in the beginning. He's somebody I admire a lot, and I'm one of the billions of people on earth who admire him. And even though I was disappointed by what he did in Ivory Coast and Libya. But when you come and you want to walk in the footsteps of somebody like Dr. King, right, who was about justice and freedom, when we know, for instance, that America and European powers, they could build, the wealth of their respective nations, thanks, to the exploitations of the African masses through the multinational corporations, we will have to see Obama advancing, for instance, corporate social responsibility, whereby American corporations in Africa, they can be more effective in, for instance, giving fair wages to people, and also promoting the protection of the environment. Because when there was the BP oil spill here, we saw the President of America, how he was fighting for BP to give at least 20 billion to America. And we know that for at least 100 years, those companies are there exploiting the resources of Africa, and nobody has like enough strength in order to ask them in order to reduce the exploitation of the masses, the land, the rivers, and all those things. And that's one thing I would like Obama to see. I would like Obama to do, and if he does that, we can say that he is trying to be the symbol of justice and freedom and equality we'll be talking about, and we want to see in him.
Rosalind?
Well, in that kind of undertaking, I hope you're saying that you would like to see President Obama as a partner with the leaders of Africa who will take the responsibility themselves of managing the relationships with the corporations and all of the foreign investors who go into Africa to exploit the natural resources and the human resources. They have to show force, they have to show determination, they have to show the interest of the masses, as you say, the people of Africa first and foremost, and then others will partner with them. How is it that someone can go into the continent when it's not happening?
I agree that Africa, I agree that the leaders have to take responsibility. But like I said again, we have some good leaders in Africa.
Yes.
We have all the leaders in Africa are not that corrupt. We know how Obama was not there yet, but we know how America and the European powers, how they undermine the desire of the South African leadership, to undertake nationalization and many other things to reduce the corporate power or the corporate greed in South Africa. So there are people who want to do that. But when we know, like Nkrumah wrote, like in his book, when he talked about the neo-colonial state, many Africans are neo-colonial state. We don't expect Obama to free all the countries in Africa. There are people who want to be supported.
Nyaka, this is a really spirited conversation, but unfortunately we're out of time. I'd love to continue this, but it's for another show. Thank you very much for your comments, and Rosalind, thank you for being here.
Thank you. It was good being here and good to engage. Yes.
Thank you, sister. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Still to come on the show, sparking young minds in Sierra Leone.
Before that, Abby Ishola has some other news.
Thanks, Gary. Here's a look at some headlines from the ethnic and community media. Several immigration detention centers have come under fire for the mistreatment of detainees. El Diario La Prensa reports that 300 local and national organizations have sent a letter to President Obama asking that he close the centers and work towards improving the treatment of detained immigrants. Members of some of the 300 groups say they've received countless complaints regarding human rights violations like beatings, physical and psychological abuse, and poor living conditions. Activists have labeled a detention center in Hudson County, New Jersey, one of the 10 worst in the country. The Global Information Network reports that hundreds of thousands of Kenyans in the diaspora won't get to vote in the country's upcoming elections. According to Kenyan officials, it would be impossible for those living abroad to cast their vote in March 2013 for president, senators, governors, and members of parliament due to logistical reasons. Meanwhile, Kenyans in the diaspora have sent close to $1 billion in remittances to their homeland this year. Many Kenyans have taken to the website of Kenya's Daily Nation newspaper to vent their frustrations. From Tsingtao Daily, while Mayor Bloomberg is threatening to increase school lunch prices, Chinese parents are questioning the quality of the food. Mayor Bloomberg has proposed to raise the price of school lunch from $1.50 to $2.50 in an effort to decrease next year's projected $2.5 billion city budget deficit. Many Chinatown students won't be affected since a large portion come from low-income families, making them eligible for free lunch. However, Chinese parents feel the food quality is a major concern. Many have expressed that if the prices are inflated, the food should improve. And finally, from Novogenic, a group of Polish-speaking psychologists have created a hotline that offers therapy to Polish immigrants affected by Hurricane Sandy. Those seeking to help can either call the hotline to speak to a psychologist over the phone or schedule an appointment to see one in person. The number to call is 917-915-0665. Both services are free and confidential. Those were just a few headlines from the ethnic and community media. Back to Gary and Vianora.
Thanks, Abby. Innovate Salon is a competition that was started to spark the minds of secondary school students in the West African country of Sierra Leone. The country is slightly smaller than South Carolina. It also bears the historical distinction of being a major port during the transatlantic slave trade.
The country suffered through a brutal civil war that decimated its population and left many areas in ruins. The Innovate Salon competition was created to address some of these problems, like bringing power and clean water to people.
David Senge is the program's creator and a research assistant at MIT's Media Lab. He joined me in studio to talk about the project. David, part of the reason for which Innovation Salon was created was that the country has been receiving for many years aid, and that has not taken it anywhere, in your opinion. Tell us exactly what your project does.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think it's not just Sierra Leone, but most aid is unidirectional. You give aid to somebody, whether it's through projects or whether it's money. You say, here's this money for you to do X, or here's this thing I'm giving to you for free. And most of the time, we do not expect people to give something in return, right, for the aid that they're receiving most of the time. And what that leads to is we have people and youth who all they're doing is they're expecting some outside help to come in. They're expecting somebody else to come and solve their problem. And they are not actively looking at resources that are available around their community that they can use to address these same problems. And what we are doing and saying is, what we really should be doing is creating an opportunity, creating a platform for young people in Sierra Leone, in many other places, to look around and understand what the challenges are that they're facing, but be the first ones to take an active step in creating those solutions.
So describe the program exactly. It's a program for high school and secondary school students?
Yes, so Innovate Salon is a competition that we are running in Sierra Leone for high school kids. So we went all across Sierra Leone and invited secondary school students to look around their community to tell us what problems they had, what problems they saw, and then inform us how they wanted to solve it. In return, we gave them resources, the mentors that they needed, some cash to develop prototypes, and a network with other young people who were also doing the same, who were also participating in the same challenge. And so we gave them up to $500 in cost for resources and materials so that they can build a prototype for whatever problem they had. So for example, two students at 16 wanted to build an electronic broom because the broom that they have right now from the palm tree wasn't effective enough. It was short and they didn't like it. And so they wanted to make an electronic broom that they can use to sweep their home and their commute and their environment. And they submitted a proposal and we gave them money to build a prototype, and they built a prototype, and now they're thinking about how they can scale that. It's very different where I'm not the one who comes with the electronic broom or technology and gives it to them and say, oh, now you use it.
Another outstanding story is that of a 15-year-old named Kelvin Doe, who's been going through trash cans practically and making his own generators and batteries. Tell us more about that and how MIT here funded a trip so he could come and then bring back knowledge to his country.
Yes, so Kelvin is one of the finalists from the Innovation Challenge that we did in Sierra Leone. There were about 70 applications that came through and 8 finalists, and Kelvin's team was one of the 8 finalist teams. And what they did literally was they went around to garbage bins and picked electronic parts that they repurposed, and he was able to make a battery to start with because he didn't have money to buy a battery. And so he opened the battery and saw that there was a black thing and a metal inside and figured he might as well be able to do it for himself. And then he built a generator also from recycling different electronic components. He got a capacitor from some place, got a motor from another place, got a spark plug from another place, and then built his own generator. And then his FM radio station, which he uses in his community, right? So all of what they use, they repurposed. And we gave them the resources to buy more materials and to to be able to expand their project. But they did it all using resources that were available within the community. And then I'm a PhD student at MIT myself. And so I worked with somebody from the International Development Initiative Department, and we invited Kelvin to come and be based here as a resident practitioner so that he can learn a lot from the students, from what goes on around here, and then bring that knowledge back to Sierra Leone. But also so that we at MIT, at the Media Lab, our students can also learn from Kelvin's experience, and that the biggest innovations don't necessarily come from a place that had a 3D printer, that had or 5-axis milling machines, but it usually is very, very exciting to think about solving problems by picking parts from the garbage.
Girls in Sierra Leone face many barriers to education. I'm curious, how able are you to involve girls in the program?
So it's a very exciting question, actually, because of the 300 applicants that we received this first year, about 150 of them were girls, and we did not even screen for that. We had girls participating directly from girls' schools, and pretty much of every team that we saw, we asked students to submit a team of 3 to 5 people. It was mostly half girls, 3 girls, sometimes 2 girls, sometimes more girls than boys. And in fact, the summer innovation camp that we have, where all the finalists were invited to come and present their prototypes, and they got feedback from their prototypes, and they got evaluated, and then they met with other people like university representatives, they met with people like UNICEF, they met with private investors. There were more girls at the summer innovation camp than boys, so it's a really, really exciting process. And I actually just got an email from some lady, some teenager girl whose dream has always been to start a fragrance store. And now she sent me an email about how excited she was because she had started boiling leaves in her house, and she was doing experiments in her neighborhood, and she feels empowered to be able to do this. So we're very excited to report that there are girls taking advantage of this opportunity.
Let's talk about funding for your project. Where are you getting your funds from? Some of them are from donations. Can you elaborate on that?
When we started this competition, when we started this initiative, the bulk of the funds came from myself and my friends. So I have a group of friends who have been working with me in Sierra Leone for a while now, and I sent them an email and I said, look, I really think we should do this. And then after that, we then got fellowship grants from MIT. We got foundations giving us some money. These foundations, there's a couple foundation from New York, our foundation, and then a couple different foundations gave us money. And now our big push really is to fundraise through this online platform called CrowdRise, right? So CrowdRise, Innovate Salon is trying to raise 100K, and part of the reason we want to raise 100K by the end of the year is such to do this again. And also there's an opportunity to expand this same initiative across different countries, across different states, across different communities. We know that it works. We know the young people want to participate, and they do have the skills to solve these challenges. And so we want to create a framework where we can do this again in Sierra Leone and continue doing it, but also expand into other communities within the U.S., into other countries across the continent, really.
David Senge, thank you very much for being in studio with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Stay tuned. When we come back, battling for immigrant artists to be recognized.
You realize that 49 million Americans struggle with hunger? That's 1 out of every 6 Americans.
These people are around us every day. They're our friends, they're our coworkers, their kids go to school with our kids.
Sometimes we're not even aware that they're struggling. This problem is closer than you think. But so is the solution.
Play a role in ending hunger. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank.
And finally from us tonight, there are a number of city-based organizations that offer support and advice to immigrant artists. The one we feature in the next segment is different than most. It nurtures the best of the talent that the world funnels into New York City.
Immigrant artists and scholars in New York challenges the common myth of the struggling immigrant artist. The organization also advocates for these creative minds to be recognized as a vital and vibrant part of the city's artistic community. In the backyard of a home in Queens, Stavri Karamfilov is meticulously creating this sculpture to be an interpretation of a Shakespearean plot. He uses pieces of scrap metal he finds on city streets, disregarded or lost metal objects that New Yorkers drop.
Visual art or different form, but for me, the art is everywhere, everything.
Stagecraft and drama run strong in this Bulgarian artist's blood. Karamfilov ran several of his country's theaters, teaching contemporary drama and the history of theater to university students in Bulgaria. He toured much of Europe with plays that he directed and received numerous international accolades.
Така че артистът е винаги един и същ. Само че различните географски ширини разкриват, според мен, различни гледни точки от неговите възможности, от неговата философия, екзистенциална и творческа.
Karamfilov's artistic expression and abilities have drawn the interest of Saviana Stănescu. Stănescu herself is an accomplished Romanian playwright living in New York. She created the network called Immigrant Artists and Scholars of New York, or YASNY, for artists like Karamfilov, because she finds that immigrant artists are usually stereotyped and misunderstood.
They are infantilized and looked at many times as people who, are just new in this country. They need to learn things. They are looked as people, who need to work, to grow, but not very often as achievers or overachievers, as people who are impressive, outstanding. In a way, in my plays as well, in Aliens with Extraordinary Skills and my other plays, Lenin's Shoe, For a Barbarian Woman, I'm always trying to speak about these issues. What means to come from a culture and what means to try to make it here in New York, in the US, and how we fight the myth of the immigrant artist who has to suffer.
The successful playwright has been fighting this myth through her organization since its inception 2 years ago.
Well, I'm struggling against the myth of struggling artists. So I think it is a romantic myth, definitely. And to a certain extent, of course, all artists struggle. I thought that we need to focus on the positive aspects, and the bright side in this case is the achievements, the contribution these artists make to the New York City fabric and to the New York City artistic community.
YASNY provides social networking, promotion and support for its members. Every year they assemble at the cultural icon on the city's Lower East Side, Nuyorican Poets Cafe, to celebrate their art with a showcase of 5 minutes of talent from each artist.
The showcase is generally fun and interesting and meaningful, I hope, and the response was amazing.
Не е важно, че е трудно, не е важно, че е различно, не е важно, че си отхвърлен дори понякога. Това за мен е напълно нормално. Аз съм свикнал на този начин на живот в моята родина.
Karamfilov feels positive about the immigrant artist experience and takes pride in his work becoming the symbol for this year's annual YASNY Award for Excellence. For Independent Sources, I'm Viana Ravinka.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned.
Till next time, be independent-minded.